Welcome to Empowered by Iron, hosted by Dr. Kristen Lander from Fiercely Fueled Nutrition Coaching and Mary Morton from Grad Gains, the online resource for your fitness needs. Together, we are Empowered by Iron. Hey everyone, so welcome to Empowered by Iron. This week we have Jilly Jaworske, Team Juggernaut member. She's also the head coach at TSS Barbell at Texas Strength Systems in San Antonio, Texas. She's a 69 kilo weightlifter, and she's a badass weightlifter. Hi, Jilly.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
God, thank you so much for being on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Obviously, you're a weightlifter, 69 kilo class, but just tell us a little bit about you and why you're in San Antonio and whatnot.
Well, like you said, I am a weightlifter, and I do weigh right about 69 kilos right now. I'm actually sitting a little bit under. I am a new member of Team Juggernaut. I actually joined Juggernaut in October of 2016, so pretty recently. My coach is Max Ada, who is absolutely fabulous, and our head coach, oh my god, I just totally blanked. Mary, can we start
Of course.
Totally fine.
Whole thought process, and then I just totally blanked. That never happens. Oh my god.
You're just nervous. It's okay.
It is. I am nervous. I texted Courtney. I was like, they want a video. She's like, you're going to be fine. Okay, so Courtney is actually our girls captain, and she is part of the reason I am on Juggernaut, because I am also a Snort Life Singlet ambassador.
Wait, pause. We got to start over. Time out. That's good information.
On unedited version. I was going to own it. I was going to be like, you know what? I'm human.
Okay, keep going.
We'll just cut that out. We're good. So start over with Courtney.
Okay. Courtney is the women's captain of the Juggernaut, basically women's team, and I am her ambassador for her small company, Snort Life Singlets. So she is one of the big reasons why I was attracted to Juggernaut, and she continues to support me. One of the biggest influences for sure in my weightlifting career. Like you said too, I am the head coach of TSS Barbell. I actually am the club director of TSS Barbell. So I founded it with my assistant coach, Brittany Rucker, who is also one of my athletes. We are located in Texas Strength Systems, which is really well known in the powerlifting community. And we are surrounded by really badass powerlifters in our 13,000 now square foot facility here in San Antonio, Texas. I moved here. It'll be 2 years in March to pursue weightlifting. I used to be a visual merchandiser for Lululemon Athletica, and I did some of the visual merchandising here in South Texas before I started coaching full-time, and it evolved into what is now basically my own club, and so that I can train full-time for Juggernaut.
Every weightlifter's dream, I feel.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Lots of stretchy pants, and now lots of time to train.
Yeah, but can you ever go wrong with stretchy pants? Let's be real.
Well, you can't. I mean, they're the only pants I wear, so.
Well, so how did you get involved in weightlifting then?
Oh, man. So I didn't mean to get involved in weightlifting. I love to say it was sort of by accident. Obviously now, I'm super involved in it, and it's very intentional. I was one of those CrossFit converts, actually. I started as a CrossFitter in college. I'm trying to think back. It was 2011, 2012, and I had never, ever touched a barbell prior to that point. So I grew up riding horses my entire life. From the time I could walk until I went to college. I rode at pretty much every level. I was the beginner through the professional. When I was 16, I actually graduated early and then moved out to pursue riding professionally. I rode on the circuits all over the United States, and I competed in hunt seat equitation and show jumping. So I was a working student for some of the largest farms like in the United States, and worked and trained as far as New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Ohio, South Florida during the winter. There are a lot of circuits down there. And I got to a point in my career when I was 18, which is kind of funny because at 18 you know nothing, but I thought I knew everything. I was like, well, I'm done. I've been doing this for over, a decade. And I never went back. So I competed at St. Louis Nationals in 2010, and that was the last time I ever sat on a horse. And so I was in college, and I'd been trying to do both. I was flying up every weekend to train and to compete, and then I was in school part-time at the University of Miami. I chose because I had a full scholarship there for academics, and it was a few hours from where my parents live. They're retired. And when I stopped riding, and then I was in college, I had no idea what to do with my life. So I tried everything. I joined clubs. I was literally the vice president of a Jewish organization. I mean, literally everything. I'm not even Jewish. I the rec center. I did Zumba. Awesome. I comics club, and then I joined a sorority. I was a Tri-Delt, actually. And it was through Tri-Delt that I actually met a really well-known CrossFitter, and that was how I got into CrossFit. So he was a beta, and I was a Tri-Delt. And it's a little fuzzy because when you are in a sorority or fraternity, it sometimes gets a little fuzzy, but it was at some event that we had met. And he's like, hey, I'm starting this CrossFit club, and girls can't even do CrossFit. And I was like, well, I bet I could do CrossFit. I didn't even know what CrossFit was. I was like, whatever, I'll try it. I was probably 107 pounds, 110 pounds. I'm 5'3" and a half. And literally never touched a barbell, never really worked out other than the elliptical and Zumba class. So he convinced me to come to his CrossFit fundamentals class, and it was designed for University of Miami students as sort of a way to kickstart his idea for a club at UM. This is back when CrossFit still wasn't huge yet.
Right.
Noah Olson, which I know a lot of people know who he is. If you don't, he's been to the games now multiple times, won Southeast Regionals, but he was the person who taught me how to CrossFit. And then that was my first chance at weightlifting, right? And I say that loosely because it was with PT, and I cried every day. Bar to learn how to snatch, and I distinctly remember, because Guido was his coach at the time, who owns the gym Peak 360, and they put on Wadapalooza, which I did back in the day. I just remember Guido and Noah looking at me she is not gonna make it, literally, because I could not overhead squat the training bar.
Aww.
So Noah and I actually ended up founding the Canes CrossFit Club with another UM student, Dylan Malitsky, who's an announcer now for the CrossFit Games. He's really involved in the community. I'm really no longer involved in the CrossFit community at all, but that was how I got my start. So I'm really competitive, and within a year of starting CrossFit, I went to Southeast Regionals with Team Peak 360, and that was pretty much it for me. At that point, I realized that I could probably be pretty good at CrossFit. I didn't know if I could go to the games or whatnot, because the girls were just so big and so strong. But it was a life-changing experience, as most people have with CrossFit or weightlifting. And I ended up switching my major in college. I was a double major then with economics and exercise physiology. Before I was just business, and really didn't think I would ever do anything with fitness because I hated going to the gym, but I really liked CrossFit, and then I really liked weightlifting even though I sucked at it. I was not good. I was good at gymnastics. I had an engine, but it became very apparent at regionals that I was not gonna cut it unless I did some serious weight training, which is how I really got into weightlifting. So I had an opportunity to do an internship for my senior year through a really well-known gym in Miami, and now really the country, CrossFit Soul Miami, and they were one of the first CrossFit programs really, at least locally, that had a solid weightlifting team. I mean, they had a program which was not very popular in 2012 or 2013. It was still one of those things where weightlifting programs or coaches, it was sort of you had to seek them out, and they had 6 platforms. So they were really ahead of their time, and now they have a very large program for both CrossFit and weightlifting, but I was the original CrossFit Soul intern. So they made me do weightlifting. I came to them wanting to go back to regionals originally, and I said, I don't want to suck this time. And Danny looked at me and was like, I don't know if that's going to happen for you. He's like, you're 5'3.5". He's like, you weigh, at this point, I'd put on some weight. I was like 120 pounds. And he's like, you're going to have to get a little bigger. These girls are huge. And I was like, okay, I'll get bigger. And so we had to back off on cardio and like really start squatting and stuff. And I was like, I don't like this. In fact, I hate this. And he's like, well, that's too bad because you work here, and like you have to do everything. So it wasn't just like things I liked to do. It was that I did everything. I started personal training. Danny was really the first person who taught me about group program design and individualized programming. And I spent a lot of hours with him working with clients who were young, clients who were old, everything in between, like really high level athletes too. And I was his shadow. Like I remember coming in at like 5 a.m. and it was freezing cold, and I was just like sitting in this chair, like watching him coach, and I'm like, why am I doing this? But I really did like it, and it grew on me, because at first, like coaching weightlifting when you don't get weightlifting is so boring. It's like really, you're like, why are we doing, like I gotta watch a snatch again? And then as you get better at it, you're starting like, oh no, this is really interesting. And then when he started making me do it, like really start going to the weightlifting classes, his coach at the time was Camilo Garcia, who was a former Cuban coach for the national team in Cuba, spoke no English, guys, none. Not any Spanish. I took German in college. That was my first weightlifting coach, so to say. And like, it was really hard because half the time, okay, I didn't even like it. He was screaming at me in Spanish. Okay, Danny's like making me do this. I'm not good at it. I'm little, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And I'm like, this better get me to freaking regionals. Like after all this and coming in at 5 a.m. and watching people snatch all day and do cross, I'm like, if this doesn't work, nothing is gonna work. And then I don't know when it really clicked for me, but it was like near the end of my senior year. And something had happened with the Open that year. And I want to say that it was just my senior year and I had a lot of projects going on, but it didn't really go the way that I had wanted. And I don't remember there being like a distinctive injury or like a moment, or I was just doing a lot of gymnastics at the time and weightlifting still, because Danny was like, hey, like you're graduating, it's not really like, the Open's not your focus, you know, regionals isn't really your focus, like just keep training. And something sort of clicked. And I had a really good friend at the time. She's my best friend in college, and she was doing weightlifting too. And that was actually how I survived training with Camilo, because she's from Venezuela. And she would translate for me. And she really started getting into weightlifting. And her name is Steffi Cohen, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with her. She and Hayden have hybrid performance, but she was actually with me at Peak originally. And I had taught her fundamentals because I was the vice president of the Canes CrossFit Club, and she was a runner. Before that, she was like a national level soccer player in Venezuela. So when she really started getting into it with Camilo, and she'd gotten into it a little bit before because she was like the other CrossFit Soul intern. Because like I said, we had classes together, we trained together. We had both, like, I think we had seen totals. That's what it was, is that Camilo had posted totals for like maybe junior nationals at the time, and we were either about to age out or about to be seniors, and we were just looking at them. And I was like, that's really hard to do. I don't know if I can do that. But it was something where, you know, with CrossFit, you don't really know exactly what numbers you have to hit to go to these regional events or whatnot. And at the time, I was just so discouraged from, you know, being a senior, graduating, training, not really going where I wanted to after, you know, regionals in 2013, that we just sort of were like, let's do a meet. Let's just see if we can, like, put up a respectable total and get close to these, like, junior totals, right? And so that was when, I guess you could say, I made, like, my official switch over to weightlifting. But then I moved. Then things got really interesting, right? So then I moved back to the west coast of Florida. So I was, at the time, in a really serious relationship, and my boyfriend of years was in medical school there. So staying in Miami wasn't really an option because it was so expensive, and I had tried it for like a couple months, but we realized it would be easier for me to go home. So I stayed on Camilo's programming, and I started coaching at a CrossFit gym in Sarasota, Florida, CrossFit Sarasota. And then I would weightlift by myself at night, because then I started working part-time at Lululemon. That was not intentional either. I was in a coffee shop, and the manager came up to me and was like, I've never seen you before. Who are you? We're opening a store. Like, you look like you're fit. On almost a whim. Like, I was just working there part-time to help basically pay bills. So at that point, when I was working in a CrossFit gym and then doing weightlifting at night, and it was no longer even, like, I didn't realize how easy it was just to have, like, a coach and a team and, like, platforms and, like, times to train, I really realized that I did enjoy weightlifting, because then I was doing it by myself with no help really and no guidance, and taking these awful videos, and some of them I've showed Mary and like my other athletes. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, it's 10 o'clock at night and I just got off like work at Lulu, and I am in this CrossFit gym alone, like trying to figure out a snatch and a clean and jerk, because I had signed up for this meet that Camilo was like, you have to do this summer. And that was my first meet, and it was the MIA Classic, but I don't remember which one it was. It was like one of the first ones, and now I think they're on like their fifth or their sixth one. I actually did it this year. But that was my very first meet, and that was in 2014 in July or August. And so that's like the very extended version of how I got into it, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. That's actually a pretty intricate story. But like, it's really interesting how, you know, you had this whole other life where you rode horses and did all this other stuff, and then transitioned into something, I would say, polar opposite.
Oh yeah, it's totally different.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So now that you are a weightlifter full-time, you said you started your own barbell club, which for our listeners, I actually found Jilly through Instagram. If you're not following her, you should. On Instagram. We'll link that below. But I found her, and I realized that she had just started her own barbell club at Texas Strength System, and it's still relatively new, right? You guys are only like 8-9 weeks old?
So this is our 9th week of existence. We're going on week 10 as of tomorrow. Ooh. So yeah, brand new barbell club. This was also not, like, it's funny how, like, the best things in life are totally unplanned, right? Like, it's just, like, you stumble upon them and then you make the best of it. Didn't plan on starting a barbell club. 100% did not. It was something that kind of needed to happen. I used to train at a different facility here in San Antonio, Texas, and for some people who may be listening who are familiar with 210 weightlifting, and I really did learn a lot there, and I got to coach a lot of athletes. They have a tremendous team, especially, well, now they're men, used to be they're women. They have like 50 athletes, 60 athletes, something in that range, and I was the assistant coach there. When I switched to Juggernaut, it was primarily because I was in search of a team that really did support full-time weightlifters, and not in the sense that they had to work 60 or 70 hours a week coaching, because that was what sort of happened on a local level here, and I realized that it wasn't for me. So you can kind of see the irony of me starting my own team. I figured out very quickly that working for yourself is very different than working for someone else's weightlifting club. I competed at nationals this year, had a fantastic nationals. I mean, it was maybe the best meet of my entire life. And then soon after, really, my coaching started picking up at 210. And I mean, I would, on a bad month, I'd teach maybe 30 privates a month, in addition to coaching team training. On a good month, it'd be 50. So I was working 7 days a week, in addition to keeping the gym open, helping with management, cleaning, team training, like meets, travel, merchandise, and I wasn't really training for like 2 to 3 months there. It was, the summer gets crazy because, I mean, I'm sure as some coaches know out there, like if you coach and you compete, my client schedule is based very, very much around my own schedule. And so after nationals, then the focus really does shift to our clients because we don't have anything big until the fall normally, or, the winter, unless of course you're going to the Olympics, which is different. But for me, I'm not yet, or wasn't this year. So it wasn't even like the train of thought. So I totally put my training on the back burner and then very quickly burned myself out.
Yeah.
And came to basically the first week of September, realized I had signed up for under 25 nationals and had not been training. And I was like, okay, I have to make a change, because I really, the whole reason I was coaching full-time was to be a full-time weightlifter. So when I brought this to the attention of the owner of 210, we parted ways, as amicably as we could. He had done a lot for me, but he understood too that he could no longer give me what I really wanted, whether or not it was what I needed. I felt like I needed to make a change. So my parents actually split their time between California, Southern California, and Florida. They are retired. So I was out visiting them in September, and that was really the first time I had had a chance to train with some of the Juggernaut athletes and at their facility. Obviously, I've been following Courtney and Colin for years. Courtney was one of those first girls when I was lifting in a CrossFit gym in Sarasota by myself that I had started to follow, and she was at the OTC, and everyone wanted to be Courtney Batchelor. I don't know who anyone I love her, and I know you guys have interviewed her. She was totally the girl I looked up to, basically as I was starting to become a weightlifter. And I heard that she, was in the process of moving to Juggernaut. And so having the opportunity, my parents are out there 3, 4, 5 months out of the year. I was like, well, I'm definitely going to go check out this gym before anybody else, really. I was also very familiar with Max.
Yeah.
Just from basically his involvement with the community with his own gym, Max's gym, before he was even officially the head coach for Juggernaut. And my good friend is Ian Wilson. We had talked about Max at length, and I had always held Max in the highest regard. He's a fantastic, wonderful coach, very patient, he's brilliant. So when I had the opportunity and Chad asked me if I would join, I was like, well, yeah. Of course I joined. So then I was on Juggernaut, and this is kind of leading back to TSS. So when you're an athlete and you're on someone else's team and you're not basically at that facility, because I was still living in San Antonio, it makes it very difficult to find a place to work.
Right.
Because in Texas, weightlifting is very political, and most gyms have their own barbell clubs. So I basically was kind of, I don't want to say wandering, but looking for a facility that allowed me to still coach with the understanding that I would never be on their team because I was on Juggernaut.
Right.
It doesn't sound like a big deal, except Texas weightlifting is Texas weightlifting. And if you're not familiar with it, it is very unique and it is very cool, and the community is very tight. But teams here, and especially South Texas, not to say that North Texas isn't like that, but I can't speak from firsthand knowledge, very political.
Yeah.
So we started at a CrossFit gym, and when I say we, Brittany, one of my athletes who's my assistant coach, and a handful of athletes who had left with me from 210, very quickly realized that working out in a CrossFit facility wasn't going to work for me. I just have changed a lot since I was a CrossFitter, not maybe as a person, but my training philosophy, and not to knock CrossFit, because there's some wonderful things that CrossFit has done for our sport, and I was a CrossFitter, but I don't really go to the gym for, socializing. And if a training facility is not serious and they're not focused and they don't provide a space for serious focused strength training, which is hard to sell and hard to market, so I get it. I tried it for a month and I hated it. I just couldn't do it. And 210 was set up in such a way that the weightlifting was separate, and that was what I was used to. And I was used to training in a very focused, serious strength environment. So Wes Sunker, who owns Texas Strength Systems, has this enormous facility that opened in October. It's brand new, absolutely gorgeous. We're open until like midnight, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday too. We're open until 8. He was looking to have someone start an Olympic weightlifting program because, especially here in South Texas, it's very marketable. People are very interested in it. They get strength training. And he has a ton of power lifters who train in that facility who are interested in learning how to do Olympic lifting. So I'd actually heard about it from a friend of a friend because I'd never met Wes, had never done powerlifting really. Walked into his facility and was just blown away. I mean, there's 2,000 square feet of bodybuilding, and then you name it, they have it. They have an in-house masseuse. We're building changing rooms. There are 3-fold baths. At the time, there were 4 comp size platforms. Now we have 8 platforms for Olympic lifting. He had comp plates, comp change, barbells, and I'm just standing there basically in awe of everything that he has. But he's the manufacturer of equipment. So there's like powerlifting racks upon powerlifting racks, and I mean kettlebells, wall balls, everything you could possibly need to do personal training or conditioning or powerlifting or Olympic lifting. And he's like, okay, so we don't know how to do Olympic lifting, so we need a coach. And I'm like, what? Like, they'd invested all this money in this space, in this huge facility, and it's actually attached to 10,000 more square feet, which we're looking to acquire in 2017 as the gym continues to grow. But there wasn't a club. Like, there was nothing. There was equipment, because he's, an equipment provider for these large powerlifting meets, regionals, nationals, whatnot. At high school meets, too, in South Texas. And he's like, yeah, so what do you want to do? And I'm just like looking at it, I'm like, are you freaking crazy? Like, stuff, and I'm he's like, do you have lifters? It's like, well, yeah, I have like a handful. I had like 5 at the time. He's like, so can we start a club? And this is like 10 weeks ago. And I was like, well, I mean, we kind of have to if I'm going to like coach out of your facility, because there was no club in place. So then I started a barbell club. Okay, there's like 5 of us. Perfect. Okay, there's an official club. My members were pumped because they had a team to attach to. They felt like they were part of something. Now, it's a very serious strength training gym. Not to say that we don't have fun. We do. But it is very goal-oriented. And all the athletes there get it. They're training for powerlifting meets or bodybuilding or Olympic lifting. And I absolutely love the facility so much and don't have to deal with any of the drama that sometimes comes from like gyms that have more of a social orientation. And so people liked that. That's what I found out. I found out in 10 weeks that people really like that environment. So we went from 5 members to 20 in 10 weeks.
Amazing.
It was, again, not planned. Started an Instagram account, and that was pretty much all the marketing that I did. And then we had like 8 lifters go to a meet, and now it's like every week we're getting 1 to 2 new lifters, sometimes more, and more drop-ins too. Not like these are like official TSS Barbell members. This does not include the people who are now like the power lifters, especially, who are coming to me for like personalized training or coaching or hybrid programs to work with what they're already doing at Texas Strength Systems. So that's how I started a club. It was like a long-term goal of mine. Like I said, maybe one day I'll have a barbell club, just to give back, to coach when I'm done competing, because balancing it is really hard.
Yeah.
As an like I said, I was overwhelmed at 210. It was not something that I really wanted to do, was to manage 60 lifters, and I still don't. 20 is a great number, 30 is a great number, 40 is like, okay, now I need help. 50 to 60 is I need a squad. I really need like 4 people to help me run this. So I'm very happy with the 20 that we have.
That's awesome.
That's incredible. I love that story. You just like walk into this fully equipped gym that like most people don't even have the luxury to train at, like when they're know what they're doing. Yeah.
On your business here. And I was like, okay. I mean, yeah, of course.
That's awesome. And not only that, but it's working out. That's the even more incredible thing, is it's working out. So obviously there was a demand for it.
Well, there is, and I don't like, so initially when I moved to Texas, people ask me all the time, they're like, why are you in Texas? And so I got to a point in my relationship in Sarasota where it just wasn't going to work out, and I wanted to seriously pursue weightlifting, which people at the time thought was pretty laughable. I got laughed at a lot. because they're like, there's no money in weightlifting. And I said, LOL, like, cool, I'm still gonna do it. I'm poor anyways. I'm like 22. It's not like anyone at 22 really is making like a ton of money. I mean, there's exceptions, of course, but like most people are not. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna change my whole life, I might as well do it big. And I was attracted to Texas because of TSS Barbell and Ursula, honestly. When I started Googling weightlifting, females in weightlifting, she was one of those first names that popped up, and I saw she was in South Texas, and I was like, how much does it cost to live there? Literally, that was like my I was like, well, can I afford it, right? Like, these are questions that you seriously ask yourself as a weightlifter. And I had started working with, coincidentally enough, I was coaching at 2 gyms in Sarasota before I left because I needed to basically make more money once I broke up with my boyfriend. Again, like, just being totally honest. And I had met one of her lifters at the gym that I just started working at. So I used to work at another gym called Real Fitness Sarasota, and he was on TSS Barbell. And he coached me one day, and he's like, he's like, are you a weightlifter? And I'm like, well, like, I do weightlifting by myself, like, in the gym, and I really want to be good at it, but, like, no, I'm not. I've done a meet before once, and it was okay. I did okay. I power snatched things and got nervous, and, I was a 58. And he worked with me for, like, 2 hours, and he's like, well, if you ever want to be a weightlifter, give me a call. And this was Spencer Arnold. And Spencer, as you know, was a 69. Now he's a 77 for TSS Barbell. And again, hold him in the highest regard. He's a phenomenal, phenomenal coach, person, human being. Was really my second weightlifting coach, but my first one that spoke English, and a lot of progress really quickly. He too said, if you ever end up in Texas, he's like, I know people. And he helped me remotely for a period, actually a long time, almost a year, including my time at 210. He helped me find 210 weightlifting, and when I had told him that I'd been doing some, research on the internet, and I saw Texas looked pretty cool for weightlifting, he was like, well, yeah. And he was, he had moved from Dallas pretty recently when I'd met him to Atlanta, the Atlanta area, for a job, to raise his family. And he's like, yeah, he's like, you ever want to move? He's like, stay south, go to Texas. And I don't think he took me very seriously, because he was like helping me, and, I'd done a second meet at that point with him, and we're not like, he had helped me through it, and I'd qualified for AO, and this was like maybe March of 2015, but I was still living in Sarasota, like working at 2 different gyms, like working part-time, and I was like, fuck it. Like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to Texas, because Spencer said Texas is cool. Seriously. I'm like, had no idea. So I looked at cities in Texas that had Lululemons and that I could afford to live in, because I looked at cost of living, and I found San Antonio. I knew nobody here. Like, no one. Never been here before, never been to Texas before. Saw Ursula was like an hour away, and I was like, okay, Spencer says this is good. Like, Texas is cool, and it has weightlifting. I'm gonna move. And so I did. And that was actually how I ended up at 210. Damn. But yeah, so it was kind of like a long, intricate story, but when I moved to Texas, it was everything that I had imagined as far as weightlifting had went, and the demand here for weightlifting is just insane. So, like, it was big back when I moved here 2 years ago. It's bigger now more than ever. Because, I mean, women in weightlifting, our membership has doubled with USAW in the past 2 years. And so this was 2 years ago that I moved, and it was big. So it is kind of like its own country. If you ever sit with Texans at national weightlifting meets, like, people like paint their nails with like the Texas flag and stuff. Texas States is coming up. It's like a national level meet. I don't know if you've ever seen the medals that they give out. They are ridiculous. There's like a qualifying procedure. You have to do qualifiers. I mean, Texas is pretty cool as far as weightlifting goes.
That's amazing.
That's a pretty badass story. I mean, just to pick up and move and like, all right, I'm doing this. That's awesome.
Looking back, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment by myself and had no friends, and had secured a job at Lululemon, basically doing product management and more visual merchandising. And then that was my full-time job for a while, because I, didn't have a coaching job here when I moved here. I was just a weightlifter who worked at Lululemon.
Right. Well, so you mentioned at one point that you used to be a 58 kilo lifter. And so a lot of women really choose to like cut weight. But you have moved up into the 69 kilo weight class right now. So how has moving up weight classes like helped or hindered your progress, like mentally or physically? What's that process been like for you?
It's like really funny that we're talking about this, because when Mary sent the questions over, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a long conversation. Not that it hasn't been a short conversation, but so I moved up to 69 for a lot of different reasons, but most of them were strength related and some of them were for personal reasons. I started at a 58 because I had already gained like almost 20 pounds. So I just was a 58. It wasn't like I had to cut or anything, really. I think I cut a little bit like the week before that meet, but not like a ton. It was because that was where I sat as a CrossFitter, right? And so you do a lot more cardio as a CrossFitter. I definitely had way more abs back then. It was pretty cool. But when I started doing weightlifting, I very quickly became a 63. I suddenly, like, I have really long legs. People don't realize how short I am because I have impossibly long legs. And so when I started doing weightlifting, squats are like a constant in your life. And all of a sudden my legs were really the legs of like a 69, but I still had the upper body of like a 58. So my coach at the time, Spencer, he was like, well, why don't you be a 63? And we were like, okay. So then I got qualified for everything as a 63 within like 2 months. So like nationals, AO, under 25, all of that. And we're like, okay, this was great. This is awesome. Like I was happy. I was sitting at like 61 kilos. Life was good. And then work got like really crazy. And my stress level was crazy high, which is part of the reason why I left Lulu. But especially during holiday, it like November, so September, November, if you've ever worked retail, if anyone out there is listening, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's hell. Yeah. It's worst. And if you work in back of house like I did, it's a nightmare. And so trying to do 20 plus hours of training, because Spencer Arnold's programming, if you're on it too and you're listening, you know that it is very high volume. It's awesome, but it's a lot. It took me like 20 to 25 hours a week to complete. I started getting to a point where my hormones got really, really weird. So I was really, really overtrained, not because of his training, more so because of my recovery. So this is no fault of Spencer. It was totally because my job at the time was so many hours a week, and his programming, especially if you do remote programming, you know it's not always perfect because your coach can't really see the effects that programming is having on you. So my body weight went from like 61 to 65 during holiday of 2015. So then we had a little bit of a problem because I was like, dude, I'm not cutting to 63. I feel really stressed out now as a 65. I'm like sleeping at work. My life is getting more crazy because at this point it was maybe late September when things had started picking up. And he goes, well, what are you trying to tell me? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to tell you I think I'm a 69. And he just like laughed. He's like, you're 65 kilos. I'm like, dude, you don't get it. He's like, well, if you're going to be a 69, you're going to need some more stretchy pants. Because if we're going to do this, you're going to, like, really do it, and I'm going to start squatting you more. And I'm like, oh, baby Jesus, please, no. Like, are you kidding me? But I started training even more and kind of got into this, like, vicious cycle of being really, really tired, stressed about work, training, and blew up to, like, 67.
Nice.
So I did a meet in October of 2015 and put up like the biggest total I've ever put up my entire life. And at that time it was like 180. And to give you an idea of when I started my first meet as a 58, I think I put up like 130 or 133. So this was within a little over a year's time, which qualified me for nationals as a 69. and AO. So we kept me as a 69. Spencer also needed a 69. At the time, he had a really solid women's team, and he still does women's, although I'm not as familiar with the roster now. Mm-hmm. And so had a 63, he had a 58, he had small women. So he's like, hey, like, let's go for it. Why don't you be a 69 for AO? I weighed in at 66.1. Was like kind of where I sat, and 66, 67, because of stress with work and all the training I was doing, that was just fine, right? So I stayed there. In February of 2016, I finally started to fill out the class a little bit more. I was like consistently like 67, 68. Still like under, obviously, right? Most 69s sit at like 70 something. But I was getting into a lot of issues with recovery now. So it wasn't like we couldn't really like gain any more weight. At first we had just like let me eat more to like deal with the fact I wasn't sleeping or training like as I should have been. I was just training a lot, working a lot, not sleeping, and like eating a ton to like feel better. So I blew like up. There are these like weird cysts I get in my shoulders. I have a gimpy right shoulder. I was thrown by a horse and dragged when I was like 14. And so it dislocated and I reset it myself, which was irresponsible. But at 14, like you just don't think about stuff. And so it's entirely, my rotator cuff is entirely scarred and I have a labrum tear in there that has never been fixed. So when there is a lot of volume, like upper body volume, I went through a period where the scar tissue would break up. But when it broke up, these basically like cysts full of joint fluid would rupture, and then I would have to have them drained. And between November of 2015 and February of 2016, I threw 5 in one shoulder, and then because of all the stress on one shoulder, I popped 2 in the other.
Jesus.
So I got to kind of a really sad, and I don't want to, things happen, but part of the reason I switched over to working at 210 full time was because Spencer and I agreed that it made more sense to have someone watching me because I was injured than for him to continue to program for me remotely, and also because I could not successfully complete the volume that he was prescribing because I was injured and because of my work situation in San Antonio. So Spencer and I like parted not because he's not a great coach, and he is and a great person, but because I really had no way of like relocating again to where he was living in Alpharetta, Georgia, any means to do it. And that at that point, programming for an injured athlete remotely becomes nearly impossible. So I initially then switched over to being a full-time athlete at 210, and then was coached by the owner of that team, Steve Galvan. But this was it was like March 1st, 2016. So Steve actually coached me for a pretty short amount of time. We tried it for like 6 months and it just didn't work out. But so he let me stay as a 69. So when I joined Steve's team and then left Spencer's, Steve didn't really care where my weight was. If I wanted to be a 63 or a 69 or 75, like he doesn't have like a big enough women's team to really worry about a roster. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting, after the stress of like being injured and working and whatnot, I started going through a lot of changes, and one of those changes was coaching full-time for Steve and leaving Lulu. So we sort of let my weight do whatever it wanted to do, and I got up at my heaviest to like 71. But I was not weighing anything, measuring anything, just really focusing on being a good coach and getting strong. And switching over then to a new program that was way more lower body and way less upper body, because we had to let my shoulders heal and at least give them some time off. So again, like the, progression from 58 to 69 was very organic. I've never had a coach until recently who has been open to me cutting weight because I'm still so new to the sport. And I really was a year ago even. I'm going on, year 3 now. So things are a little different now because I've been doing it consistently for almost 3 years. But the focus was always on just increasing my total, developing better technique, and really putting up totals that I could be competitive at, regardless of weight class, just competitive totals. Mm-hmm. So the reason why this is a very long-winded conversation is because I'm actually cutting weight.
Uh-oh.
Because my life has changed, right? And we talked about all these changes. So I'm no longer coaching all these hours, and I now am a full-time Juggernaut athlete with a part-time coaching job as a club director and head coach for TSS. And so I'm sitting at like 67 right now again. And the girls in 69 are getting really big.
Yes.
They're getting really freaking huge, guys. Like, I'm 5'3.5", and 2 years ago, things were very different. So we're going to see where it goes. I'm working with Kristen Pope, actually, who has also been on the podcast. She's one of my teammates. And I also have an RP template because RP is an official sponsor of Juggernaut. And so I am relying on our sponsors and my teammates to sort of help me do this. Now, this is something where I haven't really told that many people. The only people who know about it are you guys now, everyone listening. Kristen, Courtney, and Max. And Brittany, of course, she's my assistant, and she's kind of got wind of it. She's not super excited about it because Jilly, who eats everything, is really, really happy. Jilly, who has to cut, is probably going to be a little grumpy at first. But the way that this sport is going, like, part of being part of, like, a team like Juggernaut is that, you know, we have to be competitive. And as the girls in 69 continue to grow, either I have to really start bulking hardcore and sit at like 71 or 72 and cut, or I need to be smaller in order to be competitive, right? Not because I want to look sexy or, you know, have abs, although that's really cool too, and if you're into it, that's awesome, but that's not for me. But because these girls are now putting up numbers that are phenomenal, and the numbers that they're putting up in the top 20, you know, lifters, you know, top 20 69s are numbers that would have won nationals 3 or 4 years ago. So I don't know what I am cutting to. We are going to feel it out. But because I've been consistently losing weight since AO, we're going to kind of see if I'm happy and I'm still strong in 1 or 2 lower weight classes. We don't know yet. But as, you know, maybe we'll check in later with, or I'll check in later with Empowered by Iron. I could be like a 58 by then. I could be a 69 still. We just don't know. It's something that going into a new quad and really focusing on like how do we win more medals as a team and as an individual, this is a change that is not because I want to fit in smaller stretchy pants, but because I really do want more medals. I got my first national medal this year and I'm like, okay, I want more of those. So we'll see. But yes, I am working with my teammates. It is like very supervised, and I will only do it as long as like my overall health and my mental health are like awesome, because now my stress level is so much lower having my own team and basically training full time for Juggernaut.
That's cool. You mentioned some things that I think are really interesting that I think a lot of our listeners might not know a lot about, but you talked about how you got stressed out, your hormones got really out of whack, and then that led to some under recovery, and that is a very real thing, and I commend you for just allowing your weight to just go up as it needed to, because a lot of people would fight that and wind up getting injured or feeling really horrible.
And yes, and so there are times when we don't listen to our body, right? Like things are uncomfortable or we're training, and you know, we can't listen to every whim, right? Like, oh, I want an Oreo. Well, maybe we don't need an Oreo today, body. But like things like you have to go to the ortho 7 times because you're blowing cysts out of your shoulders. You have to wake up, and I had to wake up. So that was not something that I could continue to do, because then I would never achieve what I want to achieve in the sport of weightlifting, or what I'm capable of. So for me to allow my body to heal, being in a caloric deficit is not really what you want to do. I have a background in exercise physiology, so I do have a bachelor's of science. I actually, too, got halfway through my master's. It's a long story, but it's something where my background is like the science behind exercise. And when things like, the hormones I talked about, especially cortisone and cortisol, get out of control, it is not ideal to keep pushing in your training. And if you're not recovering, something has to go. And the thing that I could control, because I worked full time, was my food intake. And it wasn't like I was eating like an idiot, right? Like, I was still eating really healthy foods. I mean, like, all of the foods that I will continue to be eating, like following like Kristen's programming and, sticking with like almost the RP food guide, because I really like their program. I was just eating more. And because of my stress levels, my weight, I wasn't very lean. I was dealing with injuries, and I was dealing with a very stressful job. And it wasn't that I wasn't training hard, right? And we see this a lot, especially in CrossFit, because their volume is so high. And I went through it as a CrossFitter too. Sometimes doing less is more. Mm-hmm. And whatever you can change, you change. And if you are on a team and you can't change your training, right, then you have to change something else. And for me, that was my weight. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a 69 because I want to eat whatever I want and I don't care. It was like, no, I'm a 69 because if I don't do something to feel better, I'm going to lose my mind and stop weightlifting, or quit my job or something really rash.
But the byproduct of that is that you got stronger, and you got a lot stronger.
I mean, I blew up, like in both ways, right? I got bigger and my total went through the roof. But that was something too that just takes time, and allowing myself to be a little bit bigger in order to be stronger. And so with my athletes too, I don't encourage cutting. Like, if it's something they want to do, I'm usually open to listening as to the reasons why. But it is a very serious conversation that I like to have with them, and really it depends on what their goals are, right? So for me, trying to be the strongest woman possible, being bigger meant that I could do that with all of the other factors in my life. Now that things have changed, though, it will allow me to, now that I'm not really dealing with injury after injury. I have minor injuries that we all deal with, but not catastrophic shoulder injuries. It will allow me to basically sleep more, recover more. I'm training at a much lower volume with Max than with any other coach I've ever had, which I really love. Max is a phenomenal coach. If you ever have the chance to work with him, do. I'm now at a place where I can do less and still be really strong as a potentially smaller female.
I know that's something a lot of our listeners struggle with, is just that sitting at a higher weight just so you can get strong, because you meet a lot of people who constantly cut. But that's pretty inspirational. If our listeners are taking anything away, that you really do need to get bigger, not exponentially bigger, but bigger to be stronger. Okay, Jilly. So, kind of our final question. So, Empowered by Iron, this podcast was all about how women's everyday lives were directly influenced by the barbell or gym or training. How has weightlifting changed your life, physically, mentally, or even emotionally? How do you use weightlifting? I mean, it obviously is your entire life, but how do you use the disciplines of weightlifting and apply them to other parts of your life?
Gosh, this is a little challenging. So guys, my friends are weightlifters. So, I mean, pretty much all of them. Not to say that I'm against having friends who are not, but they are. It's just because we all get each other. My job is now as a weightlifter and a weightlifting coach, so that is a huge change. My life revolves around waking up, eating, and sleeping in order to train and coach weightlifting. So from an emotional standpoint, weightlifting has definitely given me tools and really strength to just handle the challenges that life throws at you, because there are things issues we all deal with outside of weightlifting, right? Things like finances and family. But it is really a way of it is a tool that you can use in order to get through your daily struggles. So the constant that is the iron, and that is your training, and the platform, that stability is something that I rely on to ground myself, I guess, and stay focused. And by simply grounding myself in it, it has now kind of spread and become my whole life. Not intentionally, just sort of as an effect, because I think I really do love it, believe in it, and have used it to physically change my body, mentally change my body, my career. It's really hard to just sum it down into different parts, right? Because my whole life is weightlifting. I'm very, very passionate about it, doing it, teaching it, introducing people to it, even if they don't want to do it. It is something that is, even now, more than ever, more readily available for women to empower themselves and to feel strong and to give them something to do other than, getting on an elliptical or going outside and running. It's something that gives you a family, gives you a team, gives your day purpose, sometimes helps you to guide what food you put in your mouth or, what you don't put in your mouth, where you go at night, what time you go to bed, who you're out with on weekends. I mean, it really can change your whole life for, good or for better or for worse, but hopefully for the better. And for me, it certainly has been for the better.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think the theme with you is you are really good at just allowing things to happen in your life and not fighting it. And it's just really inspiring.
Well, thank you. I know people always ask and they're like, I don't understand how this happened. And I'm like, well, it sort of just did because I allowed it to, which as a control freak, like most of us are who are weightlifters, is really hard to sort of let go of control. But we have so much less control than we think. As much as we can control the day-to-day, what happens to us, it's so much how we react, and that's weightlifting. And so that's, that principle has carried through, from, I don't know, maybe doing a million snatches to, every aspect of my life.
So if our listeners want to learn more about you or find you on the internet, how can they find you?
So my barbell club is called TSS Barbell. We have more information on our website, which is texasstrengthsystems.com. For me personally, my Instagram is probably the best way to follow what I'm up to, and that my handle is just at Jilly Jaworske, which I'm sure you guys will link at the bottom. Yeah. TSS Barbell also has an Instagram at TSS Barbell with more contact information. If you would like to get a hold of me personally, there's a contact button. My email address is up there as well.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Oh, wait, TSS Barbell, you guys are hosting your first meet, right?
Okay, so yeah, another new role, meet director. Super excited. I'm hosting my first meet with our club on February 18th at our facility here in San Antonio. We will have electronic scoring. We have some really cool prizes. We are teaming up with Gainsbox, Sort Life Singlets, and United Lifters, possibly 2 more companies, in order to give all of our athletes prizes and awards, because I'm really big on that, especially on a local level. I think it's really important that you get something for going out there and kicking ass, even if it's not much, but I don't want to move away from that. So it's going to really be a high quality event on February 18th. The link to sign up for that is also on TSS Barbell's Instagram, and entry is $45. And Mary's actually going to be there.
Yeah, I fly out in February.
Yay!
In our meet, which I'm super excited about because she's going to qualify for AO Series 1.
Hell yeah.
I'm pretty excited for not only my club, because it's our first meet, but for my athletes who are competing in it.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show. It was awesome to talk to you. You have a wonderful story.
Thank you guys for having me.
If you like what you heard today, please help us connect with other female badasses. We would love if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Tell your friends about us. Visit our website, which is empoweredbyiron.com. You can find each of us on Instagram. Mary is at MaryMo_92, and Kristen is at Kristen with an I, Lander. Future topics will include nutrition, programming and training, mental health, and just general female badassery.
Yeah, so let us know what you want to hear. If you have any input, that'd be awesome. And guys, this is Empowered by Iron. We want it to be a resource and an outlet for women who are finding their confidence, their independence, and their strength through iron. So thank you for listening. Thank you for checking in. And until next time, I'm Mary.
I'm Kristen.
And this is Empowered by Iron.